Welcome one, welcome all to this prophetic insights. Friends, the Protestant Reformation continues right here on Safe to Serve and Prophesy Again platform. And this particular presentation is going to be a continuation from what we covered this afternoon during midday power surge. And that particular lesson can be found right here on YouTube, Prophesy Again TV, also on our Facebook page, Saved to Serve. Friends, let's get right into it. Welcome one, welcome all. All right, friends. We're told in Revelation chapter 11, verse 7 and verse 8, the beast from the bottomless pit has two primary characteristics. What are they? Sodomy and atheism. Sodom and Egypt. And those two traits are prevalent today in society globally, especially in the United States of America, which shows the mark of the beast is near, which also signals the second coming of Jesus Christ is even at the doors. Take a look at this, my friends. There it is in France, the principles of Revelation 11, verse 7, verse 8. And friends, the blasphemy that was seen during the French Revolution is prevalent today. Watch this, my friends. All right, friends, take a look at this. This is CNN's Chris Cuomo dismisses God. He actually said, you don't need help from above to make things better in this country. All you need to do is just look within. That's blasphemy, my friends. You don't need help from above. Well, we understand that to mean above. God is the one who is above. He sits high and looks low. The psalmist says, listen, friends.
And you remember, if you believe in one another, and if you do the right thing for yourself and your community, things will get better in this country. You don't need help from above. It's within us. And you remember, if you believe in one another, and if you do the right thing for yourself and your community, things will get better in this country. You don't need help from above. It's within us.
Just look within. And what came to my mind was what we covered this past Sabbath, addressing Professed SDA ministers going back to study and to practice the so-called mysticism, spiritualism of their ancestors, stating, look within and tap into the cosmic power within. Look at this, my friends.
And I've had to go on my own personal journey of relearning by simply saying, why was I told certain things? And could it be that the very things I've been told are trying to keep me from the very thing that will liberate me and allow me to tap into the cosmic power that resides within me, and then use that power for the healing of the nations? Could it be that my slave masters knew there was more in me than I thought? And could it be that the mystic journey is the journey that unveils that beautiful cosmic power within?
And notice, friends, what are we told on that very same point? Looking within, tapping into the cosmic power within. What are we told? In Great Controversy, page 554, is the same trickery that Satan used in the Garden of Eden to beguile Eve. You could read the red words. The throne is within you, said a spiritualistic teacher, as the spiritual consciousness awoke within him. And since I covered this past Sabbath, I won't spend much time here. But it is connecting with what we are seeing happening in the world. The same spirit of the world has now not crept in, has now inundated many leaders within this church movement. Look at this.
So what is it that I'm missing? And I had to revisit the spiritualism of my ancestors. And one thing that the medicine man of the Congo understood is that you cannot defeat darkness without until you first defeat darkness within.
And take a look at this statement, my friends. On that very same point, this is Great Controversy, page 243, which says, those who are destitute of the scriptures, what do they do next, my friends? Red words on the line. They return to the superstitious beliefs and pagan practices of their heathen ancestors. As in the past, so in the present. And listen now to what Andrew Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, said in connection to what his brother said. Look within, don't look above. God is above. To find solutions, to solve America's ills, look within. All right? The brother, Governor Cuomo, said this. Listen.
It is directly a result of what you do today. The number is down because we brought the number down. God did not do that. Fate did not do that. Destiny did not do that. A lot of pain and suffering did that. And that's why we...
God did not do that. That's clear, my friends. The two brothers making the statement. And remember, in France, it was the legislators who declared there was no God, blasphemy. Now we have prominent individuals, one a journalist, CNN, another a governor, blaspheming God. Don't you forget, the papacy blasphemes God. Look at this, my friends. My friends, the image of the beast is forming. Great Controversy, page 445. What are we told? Don't you miss these words. When the churches unite, they will influence the state. Keyword influence. Influence the state to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions. Then Protestant America will have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy, and the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters will inevitably, surely result. Friends, Mayor Bill de Blasio kept the churches in New York on lockdown because Cardinal Dolan of the Roman Catholic Church said, keep the churches closed. The church, Catholic Church, primarily influencing the mayor of New York. Take a look at this, my friends. There it is. Listen.
The court said you openly discouraged religious gatherings and threatened religious worshipers and sent a clear message that mass protests are deserving of preferential treatment, essentially saying that you treated the protesters who were on the streets differently than the religious gatherings that were on the streets. Your reaction?
No, just wrong. We worked with the religious leadership of this city for months. Cardinal Dolan in the Catholic Church and so many other religious leaders who were in full agreement that it was not time to bring back religious services because of the danger it would cause to their congregants. The protest...
Out of all the so-called leaders that Mayor de Blasio said he spoke to in this time of crisis, whose name did he mention? I thought America was a Protestant nation. Whose name did he mention? Cardinal Dolan of the Roman Catholic Church, that many call the Red Pope, in quotes, the Red Pope. Does Cardinal Dolan hold the keys of the city of New York? Look at this, my friends. There it is, Great Controversy, page 100. Look at those two keys. And even Vatican City has the shape of a key. There it is, my friends. In past times, the Pope closed cities shut down churches, and said, we hold the keys of heaven, the keys of earth, the keys of hell. There it is on the screen. All right, friends, GC 101. And what are we told? In that same time, it was done to capture and persecute John Huss. But praise God, John Huss continued the work of aggressive, effective evangelism. So what are we supposed to be doing now? 2 Corinthians 13 verse 8, red words underlined. Last sentence, we can do nothing against the truth, but for the truth. Back to Mr. de Blasio. Listen what he said next.
The protests were an entirely different reality, a national phenomenon.
A what? In other words, he's saying we allowed the protest because it was a grassroots movement. So we allowed it. My friends, is there another grassroots movement coming? Backed by popular demand? Yes, it's a call for Sunday rest by law. Listen, friends.
The protests were an entirely different reality, a national phenomenon that was not something that the government could just say, go away. It's something that really came from the grassroots and obviously had profound meaning. And we're all acting on the meaning of those protests. But it's really apples and oranges.
It's really apples and oranges. I'll come back to that. What does that statement say on the screen? The bottom paragraph, great controversy, page 592. There is going to be a call, a popular demand for a law to enforce Sunday observance, and the mayors and the governors and the civil leaders will yield to this popular demand. Why? They want to secure public favor, their office, their seats. And he had the boldness to say it's apples and oranges. Friends, let me tell you something. The same amendment, which is the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, that offers freedom to worship, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, freedom to petition the government to redress grievances, is the same that addresses peaceful protests. Yet Mr. de Blasio is saying this, you are comparing, let me fix this one up. You are comparing apples with oranges. No, it's the same amendment. You are actually comparing apples with apples. That's the point. Friends, read the article. I won't say much more on this. There's more salient points in the article. But this is the one takeaway. Church controlling state. All right, take a look at this. All right, friends, look at this now. This is July 3rd, 2020. Headline says, the founders meant to keep government out of the church, not God out of the government. In other words, the church can control, influence the state. It says, these days, the phrase, the wall of separation between church and state has come to mean keeping God out, keeping God or his believers from having a big effect on government and public life. But that's not what the founding fathers were thinking, says this author. In Thomas Jefferson's mind, the wall of separation was a unidirectional wall, not bi-directional wall. All right? Put there to keep the government out of the church, not to keep what, friends? The influence of the church out of the government. The influence, in other words, the church can influence civil leaders. And my friends, what happens when that takes place? Great controversy, page 445. The image of the beast is completely formed. My friends, the Protestant Reformation continues. Get ready, get ready, Get ready. Remain ready. Get others ready. It's time. Look at this, my friends. Listen to David Barton, one of the scholars and prominent theologian among the religious conservatives in America. Listen to what he said about nothing is wrong with church influencing state. The Constitution was simply to keep the state from controlling the church. Listen.
The concept of separation of church and state is not secularization. And by the way, this is really important to understand, because the critics today say if you don't have separation of church and state, the church is going to take over the government. No, no, no. All the history of the world, it's the government who takes over the church and makes it an arm of the state.
Right.
And so it starts back 391 AD. Emperor Theodosius said, I'm a Christian. I now decree the whole world's going to be Christian or I'm going to kill you. That's a state-established church.
Right.
And so we have a number.
So he gave one example. And even though there might be a few, my friends, what do we see permeating all of history, Bible times to history? We find is the church influencing, controlling the state. The church cannot be an arm of the state, vice versa. Friends, go to the Bible. At the crucifixion, it was the church who influenced and controlled the mind of Pilate. That's Bible. All right, friends? You go back to the time of Jezebel. All right? Jezebel, a woman, a church in prophecy. It was Jezebel who influenced and controlled Ahab. 1 Kings 21, verse 25. You come forward, Constantine. And even though you may find a few incidents where the state controlled the church, remember, it was the church leaders who became politicians. Does it make sense? And what is happening now? A movement for church pastors to run for civil office. Look at this, friends. Constantine, the red words in the middle. When Constantine enforced Sunday rest by law, red words, he did this. Blue words, he was urged to do this by the bishops of the church. It was still church influencing and controlling the state. And my friends, it's even clear when you look. There it is on the screen. It's clear. He was urged to do this by the bishops of the church when Constantine enforced Sunday rest by law. When you look in the Bible, Revelation chapter 17, verse 3, verse 7, and verse 18, you find the woman riding the beast. Beast, civil power. The one who is riding is the one who is in control. And verse 18 of Revelation 17, the Bible tells us she controls the kings of the earth. That's Bible, my friends. May I give you one more? Go back to the Garden of Eden. Who influenced who? That eventually led to sin coming into the world. It was the woman influencing the man. Eve influencing Adam. Look at U.S. history, my friends. Great controversy. Page 297 is clear. The church leaders controlled the civil government during the early colonists coming to America. And what did that lead to? Persecuting church-state union and persecuting God's commandment, keeping people. That's clear. Pause the video, friends, and read that. Notice now as we move on. Let's come to Twitter. Look at this, my friends. I saw this recently. Real estate agents are banned from saying master bedroom. Yes, banned from saying master bedroom because of allusions to sexism and slavery. July 4th, 2020. With that in mind, look at Twitter. No more slaves and masters. ban those words. Twitter engineers ban whole range of terms and fight for more inclusive language. Friends, I gave you a snapshot right there. What words are they now banning? Look at those words. You could pause. Left column, master and slave. Friends, in the Bible, is the word master in the Bible? Yes. Is the word slave in the Bible? This is what I want you to see. This movement will also trample underfoot the scriptures, just as in Revelation 11, verse 7 and verse 8, making war against the word of God. Look again, the red arrow, gendered pronouns as he, him, his, banned. Friends, are those words in the Bible? Yes. Just imagine someone quoting the Bible on Twitter, and Twitter bans that post or bans that tweet. Can we not see what's coming, my friends? Not only freedom of speech under attack, but the Bible is under attack. And those who proclaim and live those principles. Look at this, friends. And again, it's all the LGBT movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. Look at this now. We want to ban the Bible, remove the clobber scriptures. The world is saying that. Also professed SDA leaders and people, Loma Linda. People are also saying that. Remove the clobber scriptures from the Bible. Well, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. If you offend in one point, you're guilty of all. Breaking all the points, my friends. There it is on the screen. Come back to Twitter. They want a more inclusive language. A more what, friends? Gender inclusive language. Do you remember I covered this several months ago, maybe years ago, the devotional book called Christ Triumphant? Look at this, friends. Not only in the world, we want more gender inclusive language. Look at this. This is Christ Triumphant, a compilation of E.G. White's writings. These were the board members. Like the Bible writers, red words on top, Ellen White used the language of her day. However, writing styles change, as do the meanings of words, blue words. In her time, words such as he, man, men, and mankind were accepted as generic terms that included both men and women. Today, this is not so common. I wonder why. What movement is that? Last sentence. Thus, without making any change in Mrs. White's thought, this devotional book uses gender inclusive language. Is that so? Are you telling me you can put a gender inclusive word in lieu of what Sister White wrote? If they can do this to her writings, why would they not try it with the Bible and bring up their own versions of the King James verse of the Bible? It will ultimately change the meaning. That's it, friends. Just go back and read Genesis chapter 3. Satan changed one word. Thou shalt not surely die. Not. That's it, friends. Dangerous. I'm going to stop right here. My time is getting away from me. I will return, but let me say this. This morning, afternoon, I told you, it's a mini-series. I'm going to pause right here, and then I'm going to return. The thought I want to leave you with is Acts chapter 5 and verse 29. Now, Twitter and others are banning offensive language. Speeches that we need to communicate the everlasting gospel. When they told the apostles, do not use those words. What said Peter and the others? We ought to obey God and not man. Yes, friends, the protest continues. However, Peter could not stand in that time period until he had the experience in Gethsemane. Not my will, but thy will be done. Heart conversion. I leave it there. Do you want it, my friends? Stay tuned as the protest continues. See you tomorrow. By God's grace. Maranatha.